Welcome back to the Glow Up Girl podcast. I am Kyra, and I am thrilled today to have Melissa Adams from Behind the Pink Ribbon here to join us to talk about breast cancer awareness and really a focus on her journey as a survivor. So Melissa, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, I want to go ahead and dive in because your journey is really amazing. And I want to make sure that, you get to tell us everything that you've gone through and experienced in your journey.
It's a long journey.
We've got time.
Yeah. So I was diagnosed when I was 31. It was March of 2007. And I would love to tell you that I was doing breast exams, that I was, one of those people that every month on the 1st, I was feeling my chest and my armpits and being mindful of what was going on in my body, but I wasn't. I happened to lean over in my closet, and for whatever reason, I just put my left hand on my right breast, and I felt a lump. Didn't think anything of it, wasn't really concerned. I had mentioned it to somebody at work, and she just suggested that I call my gynecologist. So I did, and they said, well, if you're having your period, just wait a week and then come back. And so I, for a week played with it, and, it's really hard when you find something foreign in your body to not keep touching it.
Right.
So yeah, I called and went in, and at first they were hesitant. My doctor told me that I didn't have anything to be worried about. I told him that I had a family history, and he told me that my paternal grandmother was too distant, that it probably wasn't breast cancer, but he still sent me. And through a series of tests, it came back that I had stage 2A genetic breast cancer. So it was over a period of time. It was about 2 months, probably 3 months actually, to get that full diagnosis. But
I mean, I have to ask the question, but obviously, how did you feel? What was your reaction when you got those test results?
I really tried to prepare myself the best that I could, and I thought I was ready. Like, I knew in my heart that it was breast cancer. There were some clues that were left along the way from the doctors, just the way that they treated me or the words that they said. And I was in my office, and a doctor that I didn't know had called, and I wouldn't think anything of it because where I worked, I would get calls from doctors often. And so she identified herself, and I still didn't put it together. And she just said, I don't know how to tell you this. And I never heard her say anything else.
Wow.
I never heard her say cancer. I never heard anything. I just, I dropped the phone. I started screaming, and I tucked my head between my legs because I thought I was going to pass out.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So, and then the next thing I knew, there were like 4 people from my work in my office trying to soothe me, and one was getting information. So I never actually heard the words, you have cancer. But I knew as soon as she said, I'm sorry to tell you this over the phone, but you have,
right.
I knew that's what it was. So yeah, it was gut wrenching, to be quite honest.
Yeah. But I think, one of the things that I, just even in looking at your site and just listening to you, and you're resilient, and you were already, like you said, you were trying to already prepare yourself. And of course, in that moment, of course, I mean, that's understandable that you wouldn't be able to just be like, okay, I'm ready. But because of your spirit and the type of person you are, once you sort of came away from, okay, I have breast cancer, what steps did you begin to take to beat it?
I want to share this because I think it's so important. And I think it's kind of a big part of my story and the lessons that I've learned throughout. But the first thing that I said once I kind of pulled myself together wasn't, oh my gosh, I have cancer. The first thing that I said was, I'm going to try really hard not to get emotional. First thing that I said was, I don't know who's going to love me now. I wasn't worried about the cancer. I was worried about somebody ever being able to step into this life with me and be a partner after what I was probably going to go through. So really, I just kind of, I remember that evening, it was a Friday, and I went home and I didn't have anything to do. I lived by myself. My family was an hour away, and I was just, still trying to process everything. And I watched a movie, and it was called Why I Wore Red Lipstick to My Double Mastectomy or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why I did it. I cried the whole time.
Oh.
But I watched it and I thought, I'm just going to do this. Like, I just have to do this.
Mm-hmm.
I have three nieces, and they were the loves of my life at that. I mean, they still are, but at that point
Right.
they were very young, and I wanted to watch them grow up. And so I just, whatever they said to do, I said, okay, that's fine, within reason.
Right. Right.
But yeah, I mean, I really, I talk a lot about, like, I just pulled up my bootstraps and decided,
Mm-hmm.
like, I just have to go. Like, I'm moving full steam ahead, whatever it is that I have to do to survive this.
Right. And how did you begin to build that network of support? Obviously, you had your coworkers who seemed pretty awesome and stepped right in to start to support you. But what did your support network look like? And what do they look like today? I mean,
No, that's a great question. So at first I was a little hesitant to tell people. I wasn't really quite sure. But my very best friend from work, he had convinced me that I needed to go to a place called Gilda's Club. It's called something else now. I can't remember what it is,
mm-hmm.
Cancer Community or something like that. But he convinced me to go to Gilda's Club, and I did an orientation. And I was really resistant at first, and I went into the breast cancer support groups,
Mm-hmm.
but by and far, I was about 30 years younger than most of the women there.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a little bit of a struggle, but then I found a young adult survivor group and really surrounded myself with them. And I would say there were probably about 6 or 7 of us that became really, really close.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are still my friends today. Some of them unfortunately have passed, but we will forever be connected. And we don't talk as much. I mean, it's been 13 years since my initial diagnosis, but, we're still connected on Facebook. And if I go to Pennsylvania, or if they were to come to Arizona, I know that we would spend time together.
Right.
We're still checking in on each other and doing all of those things. But in my support group now, I actually do coaching. I coach a breast
Mm-hmm.
cancer dragon boat team, and all of us are breast cancer survivors. So my support group is pretty big.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Um,
amazing.
yeah,
Yeah.
there are about 40 of us. So yeah. And then my husband and my parents, my family are still my biggest
Mm-hmm.
cheerleaders. So
Now, how did you overcome? Now, you said the first thing you thought was, how would someone, who was going to love you? And obviously now you're married. How did you get beyond that feeling and being able to open yourself up to someone actually partnering in your journey with you?
yeah, it was hard. And I had tried to date. Nothing felt right, but my husband just kind of plopped into my life, if you will.
Yeah.
Totally unexpected. I feel like that's the greatest way that it happens. But
Yes.
um, I was actually doing a cancer event, and we met up. A friend, his friend, and the guy who became my friend, we met him after an event and just started talking and hanging out. And I mean, it was a process. It really was a
Mm-hmm.
process. I would say for a long time I wasn't open, even though, here was a guy who he will tell you, the first day that I met you, I knew I was going to marry you. And I
Yeah.
felt it. I knew that I loved this guy, and I knew that it wasn't, he was the one that taught me, you're not cancer, you're Melissa, you
Mm-hmm.
just happen to have cancer. So I would say that it was through the relationship with him that I overcame that. I didn't overcome it before
Yeah.
by any means.
That's
um,
awesome.
yeah.
And it's so important, to have someone there and have someone who can help you through it. I think, something you said earlier when you were talking about, your history, and I think it's really great that you said that, I wasn't checking my breast every day. because a lot of us women aren't, I have to be honest and say, it wasn't until like I put off for so long getting a mammogram. Like I would check my breasts, but I have fibroids. So they're like always lumpy, And
Yeah.
so I was just like, well, they're always lumpy. I don't know. And it was in February that I went to get a mammogram and to have a first mammogram. And, then maybe a week later, they were calling me and asking me to come back. And so, of course, immediately, I was like, oh my God, like, is there something wrong with me? And I just know, having, my husband to just even go with me on the second visit, once they did the x-rays and looked, it was just really that I have a lot of, just have a lot in my breast going on all the time, it seems. But just having someone who is there and to support you, even in that moment of, for me, it was not cancer, but just the build up to getting there and going back for those tests and having my husband saying, it's going to be okay, regardless to what happens, we'll get through it. And I was just like, oh my God, I can't imagine, the feeling. So that's why I'm so inspired by you and your courage and your strength, because you went through it and
Well,
you're here today and you're
yeah.
helping women. You're using your platform and you're helping women and you're helping us to understand in so many ways how to take care of ourselves and how to helping some woman that may be just learning of a diagnosis to help her to feel stronger. So I think that's amazing.
Yeah. Well, and I will say, I think regardless, it can be a lonely journey. There's a saying out there that a cancer cell is the loneliest cell. And it just really it hits me because I also feel like many cancer patients are also the loneliest patients. We're just kind of looked at a little bit differently from other issues, illnesses, or diseases. And especially when we're young, they don't anticipate it. It's completely unexpected. But I did go through a lot of it on my own. I didn't tell people until I had to get my biopsy what was really going on. I didn't tell my family. I just lost my uncle about 6 months before. And I thought the last thing I want to do is alarm my parents that this is going to be nothing, after they just lost my uncle to cancer. So it does make a difference to have a support system around you, no matter who it is, as long as you can find somebody. But there are still aspects of it where it's very lonely.
So when you started, can you tell us a little bit about your actual treatment, the process that you went through?
So I ended up having to do bilateral mastectomy. So we got the genetic testing, I would say it was just before I made the decision of what options. So I didn't have a choice in terms of the right side. So I had a lump, and then I also had a lot of what's called DCIS, ductal carcinoma in situ, which is, for me, it almost looks like a ton of glitter just thrown about on my breast. Yeah. So it's just like all of these little calcifications. It's pre-cancer, but if left alone, it could cluster and then form into cancer. So the right side was already decided that we would have a mastectomy on that side. But once I found out that I had the BRCA2 mutation, that was when I decided to do the bilateral mastectomy. So I did the bilateral mastectomy. And then I ended up having to do radiation, which isn't very typical. I ended up having to do radiation, which was unexpected. My margins weren't clean. So they just felt that was an extra step. And so I did 30 rounds of radiation. And then in terms of chemotherapy, I opted to do a clinical trial. And in that clinical trial, it was by the click of a button on a computer, they decided whether or not I got chemo and tamoxifen or just tamoxifen alone. And I was randomized to just the tamoxifen.
What is that? What is exactly is tamoxifen?
So sometimes the cancers are estrogen and progesterone positive. So any kind of estrogen that's running through your body, that's why I had to stop taking birth control immediately because of
Okay.
the estrogen. So it just blocks the estrogen from getting into the cells. So I took that for 5 years or 6. I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, wow, it's been definitely been quite a journey for you and in a process. So, where would you say you are today? How do you feel today? How are you today?
So one of the things that I do want to mention is, my actual treatment was pretty short, but the journey was pretty long. It was about
Mm-hmm.
7 years of just different kinds of things. I ended up having to remove my latissimus muscle from my back to rebuild my right breast because of the damage from the radiation. So I've had multiple reconstructive surgeries. My last surgery was in 2014 when I had a full hysterectomy and oophorectomy. Just
Mm-hmm.
because of the BRCA2 mutation, it was recommended that if you're not going to have children, you should have that done by 40. So I would say, at this point in time, everything's been behind me. It's been almost 6 years and I feel great. I try to live my life the best that I can. I just want every day to be the best that it can possibly be. Not that I don't have days where I'm like, oh my gosh, like what if? Like today I woke
Right.
up with a headache and my immediate thought was, oh, what if? But
Yeah.
then I have to pull myself out of that space and say, don't even go there.
Right.
It's not like, just leave it be. It's not, you're
Yeah.
fine. It's just a headache.
Right.
um,
Yeah.
so even,
Um,
13 years later, it's still there, but
it's a part of you. It's
yeah,
part of your story and who you are, and but it's also a big reason of how and why you are now an advocate
mhm.
for other women. So, can you talk about what you do today to help women, and your book and your podcast as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So I basically just journaled throughout my journey. I actually have a copy of it right
Oh
here,
yes,
but
please show us.
um, yeah. So it's really just about my journey. And like I said, it was a long journey. It was 7 years. So I wrote the book, and then in talking to my husband, I said, I'm sharing my story through my book, but what if I did a podcast to share the story of other women and men who have gone through breast cancer? And the reason why I picked Behind the Pink Ribbon was because we're all represented by this pink ribbon. Somebody sees a pink ribbon and they immediately think of breast cancer. They also immediately think of women. They don't think about men. But there are stories that sit behind that pink ribbon. We're not all of our stories aren't the same. And so I just wanted to create a platform for people to share their stories. And, my hope is that whoever is listening, one, if they are just diagnosed or they are a survivor, that they don't feel alone. That there are people that are out there that maybe their story isn't exactly the same, but maybe it's similar and there's something they can relate to. And then if, people are listening and they haven't been touched by cancer personally, that maybe it just brings more awareness and mindfulness for them to really be paying attention to their bodies, whether they're women or men, young or old, because it doesn't discriminate by anything. So that's kind of my hope, is to share my story, but also to bring the stories of other people to that platform.
No, I love that. I think that's so amazing. So, where can people purchase your book? Where can they find your podcast and your site, just to be able to learn more and even donate and to help you continue to do what you do for people.
So you can find Behind the Pink Ribbon book on Amazon. It's also available at Barnes and Noble online. And you can also request it through our website, which is behindthepinkribbon.com. Um, in terms of the podcast, we are on many different platforms. So Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, Pandora. You can also use your, I don't want to say her name, but the little echo. You can actually request her to play the latest episode of Behind the Pink Ribbon. Stitcher, Anchor FM. We are pretty much on every single podcasting platform that's available.
Well, Melissa, it definitely has been. It's been a lively show today. And you are puppy approved because
Woohoo!
because he never participates in these.
Well, he was excited. He thinks this
Yes,
is an important topic and he is
it
excited. So
and it is very much. Thank you so much for your honesty and for sharing your story. And you are so very inspiring. I knew you were resilient, and I was like, and just hearing you, like, tell your story has been amazing for me. So I thank you. I wish you all the success, in continuing to do what you do and helping women and men on their journeys. And I just thank you for your time.
thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. And thank you for all of what you're doing to empower other women through
Thank
your
you.
show. So.
Awesome. Thank you. Stay tuned, guys. I'll be right back.